Well, hello there. So, I just recorded a video um, from Jericho Writers. A video reacting to an article from Jericho Writers. It was an absolutely ridiculous article. So, I found another one about how to avoid cliches in writing. Let's say you think you're writing cliches and you want to know if there's a way to avoid them, if you should. So you go online and you think, I'm going to type in how to not write cliches. And this is one of the articles that pop up. And it's kind of long. So you want to know, is this a good article or not? So let's get into it. So this is How to Avoid Cliches in Writing by Sean Glatch. These pop-up things that are coming up down here that you see down there, I cannot get rid of them. They keep popping up. Let's see if I can catch one and see X, but it's probably going to come up again. May 12, 2023. So this was written 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. Is it going to come up? Maybe not. Every time I open this article or this website, it's like popping up like register, somebody registered for something. Like, I don't care. So, how to avoid cliches in writing. I hope this isn't unoriginal. Oh, by the way, I need to say one thing. This isn't in dark mode. This website is like this. I tried to take it off dark mode, but nothing happens. So this is just the way it is. So let's get into it. I hope this isn't unoriginal, but reading cliches in writing make me feel like I've woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Really, cliches in writing are a dime a dozen. It's language that, quite frankly, is dead as a doornail. I hope I'm not beating a dead horse. I mean, if you put it all in one paragraph like that, it does look pretty awful, but you're not gonna be using it like that, right? Cliches are everywhere. They're common parts of the English vernacular, and we use them all the time in everyday speech. They're useful as expressions and idioms because they convey commonly understood ideas in colloquial language. In writing, however, cliches only serve to dampen the effect of your writing. While no story is truly original, sometimes all unoriginal stories share Something all unoriginal stories share is the use of cliches. Countless cliches in writing exist, but the savviest writers know how to snuff out trite sentences and overused character tropes. Why did I just now think that this writer is British? Let's explore how to avoid cliches in writing. This article examines both common writing cliches to avoid and the signs that something is tritely written. We identify examples of cliches in writing, offer prompts to make cliches original, and help point out character cliches to avoid as well. To begin, what is a cliche in writing? Okay, this is looking a lot more promising than that Jericho Writers article on cliches that I've reacted to before. This is a lot more promising, a lot better sounding, because they say no story is truly original, which is true, unfortunately. Unoriginal stories, I don't know what they mean by unoriginal stories, but I have a feeling what they're trying to say. It's just bland stories. But what is a bland story? I don't know. So what's good about this article starts off saying this is what this article is going to do. We are going to do this and this and this. I hope they keep their word. I don't know if cliches only serve to dampen the effect of your writing. The Jericho Writers article also said something like it makes your writing dull and sloppy and lazy. I don't know if it's that dramatic, but if they serve to dampen the effect of your writing, I don't know. I mean, if you're writing it like this first paragraph, then it looks kind of like, kind of cringy to me. But you're probably not going to be writing like this. I don't know if anyone writes like this. I don't know. But let's see. Let's see what happens. Okay. All right. What is a cliche in writing? They give definition. Wow. Articles rarely do this. Cliché, noun. An idea expressed in already written terms that gets a writer's knickers in a twist. A way to get rejected by publishers that read between the lines. The turns of phrase found in stories that are simply diamonds in the rough. Okay. Ways of thinking and writing that are old as the hills. If any of those definitions made you groan or roll your eyes, then you've just expressed why cliches don't work. A cliche is something that most of us have heard. We use cliches in everyday speech, rough first drafts, and yes, in classic literature, when those sayings were fresh and new. In other words, cliches are already written phrases that have lost their impact and originality. Ignorance is bliss, an uphill battle, judging a book by its cover. Because we've heard these cliches so many times, the images have lost their novelty, forcing readers to begrudgingly accept the information communicated. If you need to express something quick in an email, perhaps a cliche will do. But throw too many overused phrases in a poem or a story, and your reader will not turn the page. Okay. I mean, they have a point, because they made their point in the first paragraph of this article. I mean, using too many common phrases does look kind of clunky and cringy. Examples of cliches in writing abound in the English language. Sometimes we use them without even realizing they're cliches. That's true, that's true. However, if you learn the most common cliches and how they're structured, you'll learn how to avoid cliches in writing. Are we going to get into why we need to avoid cliches in writing? Is it just because your reader will not turn the page, or are there other reasons? Here's some fun trivia. The word cliché is French. So it is. As you may have already guessed, yes. It's an onomatopoeia that means click. That's interesting. Actually, it's not my first time seeing this paragraph. I must admit that when I found this article, my eyes caught the word onomatopoeia, and I'm like, what are they talking about? Can you believe cliché in French is click? It's an onomatopoeia. So French people who speak French people watching this channel, people who speak French, we've been saying click this entire time. Click. It doesn't make sense. What is this? When French book publishers used printing presses, they formed words by pushing a stereotype or preset type into the page. A stereotype is an actual type set. Stereotype. That is very interesting how the words have developed and changed. The word stereotype means something completely different today. Oh my gosh. The sound of the casting plate in the printing press made a clicking noise when it reproduced words and images. Thus, it produced a cliche. Oh, so that's how. Reproducing words and images, because a cliche reproduces things over and over. It's a cliche. Oh my gosh. That's how words change over time. That's why it's so interesting to look up like the etymology of a word, or the reason we've learned, like look at Wikipedia and look at etymology, like why are we saying this word, why are we saying it this way today, and you look and see the original meanings and it's like totally different. It's so fascinating to me. So that's why we call it a cliche. So to people who speak French, if the English speaking people saying cliche, 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 to you it just sounds like we're saying click, click, click. So in cliche, wait, not in cliche. In French, what do you call a cliche? Do you still call it cliche? Or do you actually have a different word in French that means cliche? Because if cliche means click, then maybe there is a word that means the same word, the same English word, the same meaning in English, to the same meaning, to the word in the same meaning of the English. I don't know what I'm saying. Do you know what I'm saying? So cliche means a certain thing in English. Do the French-speaking people, French language, does French have a word that means the same thing as cliche means in English? I am very curious now. So we've defined what a cliche is, something that most of us heard. It is something that has been overused many times, something that has been reproduced many times. Many times. So much so that if we see it, we roll our eyes at it. And this can be a phrase. This can be a phrase. I didn't know that. I didn't know that cliches can be phrases. They can be phrases, sayings, phrases. But they can also be like, can they also be like characters or cliches? Cliche characters? If they can be phrases, or are cliches just phrases? It's something to think about. Because here, cliche seems to just be phrases. Could it be that cliches are phrases, and things like damsel in distress or the chosen one, those are tropes? That's the difference. Tropes are characteristics or elements in a story. Cliches are phrases. Because sometimes articles and people use cliche and trope interchangeably, and I never thought that they could be. Examples of cliches in writing. There are 3 types of cliches in writing: the figurative cliche, the character cliche, and the plot cliche. Each is insidious to both prose writers and poets, so take note of the similarities you see in these examples of cliches in writing. Interesting. Figurative cliches to avoid. The figurative cliche is the most common cliche. It refers to any turn of phrase or figure of speech that, though maybe once poetic, nowadays rings false and overdone. They are poetic trifles that have invaded everyday speech. Some of these cliches have become colloquialisms. That's a mouthful of a word. Colloquialisms. In fact, they're so common as turns of phrase that we hardly register them as cliches. Nonetheless, they don't belong in scholarly or literary writing. Here is a list of cliches that you're better off eschewing. And here's a list. I'm not going to go over all of them, but some, like a loose cannon, rubbing salt in the wound, down in the dumps, better late than never, at wit's end, adding insult to injury. Oh, you need to fix this list bit here. You need to fix this list bit right here. Think outside the box, etc., I suppose. You can find many more examples of cliches in writing at this list of cliches. There is a list of cliches. Interesting. What do all of these examples of cliches have in common? They lack specificity. By speaking in generalized terms, these cliches paint broad statements about the nature of reality. Because of this vagueness, cliches cannot evoke strong images, emotional experiences, or new thoughts. Simply put, these are lazy turns of phrase. Interesting. So that's why you call cliches lazy. You need to have explained that. The other article, the Jericho Writers article, just said outright that it's lazy and didn't really dive into why it was. Here it is, guys. Here it is. Cliches paint broad statements about the nature of reality, like think outside the box, adding insult to injury, a loose cannon, weeding things out, fit the bill, down in the dumps. And it's vague, and it doesn't evoke strong images or emotional experiences or new thoughts. That is what cliches are, and that is why when you use cliches, because it doesn't do these things, because it's vague, because it doesn't evoke strong images, emotional experiences, or new thoughts, because it's a broad statement about the nature of reality, that's why it seems lazy when you use cliches. That makes so much sense now. I see. So, but these are just about figurative cliches, okay? There are other types. There's two other types of cliches we're going to go over, okay? Character cliches to avoid in writing. Okay, this is interesting because I thought tropes could have been like damsel in distress and that sort of thing, but I'm seeing it coming up here. So that means cliches can also there are tropes in cliches. I don't know what if they're going to say anything about tropes. Okay, let's see. Fresh, evocative writing is often the cure for a cliche story. However, some cliches infect a story's characters, not the words themselves. The cliche character relies on tropes and stereotypes to function as though every decision were filtered through a singular concept of humanness. This character lacks depth and reasoning. They don't contribute a unique perspective or set of circumstances. These are some common cliches to avoid in writing characters. I'm not going to go over all of these, but let's pick out some. Very popular, damsel in distress, the character who needs someone to save them. The rebel, he hates society and doesn't talk much, but he's a lover at heart. The plain Jane, she doesn't know she's beautiful, but he sees everything inside her. The nice guy, he's soft-spoken, amiable, affable, always holds door open for others, etc. If he wants something, it's the one girl who isn't in love with him. I see, okay. The gold-hearted streetwalker. She sells her body to survive, but at her core, she's pure and sinless. Interesting. Okay. Femme fatale. The attractive lethal lady. Oh, very popular in romance. The bad boy. The character who's hard on the outside, but soft on the inside. What's wrong with these characters? We already know who they are before they tell us. A good character is multifaceted, with various motives, conflicts, interests, ideas, strengths, and weaknesses. Well said, well said. What was this guy's name again? Sean Glatch. That's a very interesting name. Additionally, most of these tropes are unnecessarily gendered. While gender-related struggles form a facet of a character's inner life, it shouldn't constitute the majority of their person. These gendered, underwritten, overdone characters are universally cliches to avoid in writing. For more on character development, there is something linked here. I'm not going to go into that. Okay, so character cliches. The cliche character relies on tropes and stereotypes to function. Okay, so my question to you, Sean Glatch, and to the people listening or watching this, what is a trope then? If a cliche character relies on tropes and stereotypes to function, like what is a trope then? If we've established now what a cliche is, we know what a figurative cliche is, but what is a character cliche? And then what is a trope? Like, is there a difference between tropes and cliches when it comes to characters, or is there like the line is very blurry? Because I feel the line is very blurry. I did like what they said here, as though every decision were filtered through a singular concept of humanness. Like if you take the damsel in distress, the character who needs someone to save them, everything is going to be about save me, save me, save me. Right? So everything they do, they say, it's always going to be about them being the damsel in distress. Nothing else. I would say they are very flat. Just as they said here, this character lacks depth and reasoning. They don't contribute a unique perspective or set of circumstances. But what is a trope then? I am a little bit confused about that. Maybe it's just my own confusion, but I feel like the line between trope and cliche is kind of blurred when it comes to characters. Because here you say these are character cliches, but you say most of these tropes are unnecessarily gendered. And then you say these gendered, underwritten, overdone characters are universally cliches to avoid in writing. So what is a trope? Tell me. Plot cliches to avoid. A cliche character often accompanies a cliche plot. Plot cliches are plots with inevitable or expected conclusions. In other words, stories that we have already heard and learned from. Nonetheless, these are writing cliches to avoid for good, so keep your plots from looking like one of these. I'm not going to go over all of these. So for example, happily ever after, two people fight to be together, then go on to lead a life free of misery. The chosen one. Isn't this a character cliche though? I feel like this could be a character cliche and also a plot cliche, like it overlaps maybe. A resentful hero triumphs over a threat to humankind. Once upon a time, in a land far, far too fantastical, a story about magic and monsters. Love of passion. A torrid romance ends in a spectacular display of love and death. Sounds like Romeo and Juliet. Why avoid writing cliche plot lines? To be blunt, they're lazy writing schematics. Every important detail has been pre-selected in these stories, preventing the story from saying anything new, useful, or interesting. Many of these cliches are starting points for stories. They might lead the writer towards a certain genre or focus, but they can't stand as fully fledged plots themselves, making them cliches to avoid in writing. To be clear, a cliché plot is different from a plot structure. Many plots rely on tropes and structures, but they do interesting things with those tropes and structures, rather than simply relying on them to tell a story. You can learn more about good plotting here, blah, blah, blah. There's a link. Luckily, cliché plots can be made original, as can cliché characters and other clichés in writing. So hard to read. I'm trying so hard not to stumble too much. Okay, so they did it again with tropes in this cliché plot section. So cliché plot, many plots rely on tropes. What is the difference between cliché plot and cliché and plot tropes? Plots, tropes? Are there tropes and plots? Are there trope plots? Or it's just cliché plots? Like, I don't understand. And also this chosen one, or this one up here that says little genius, aren't those character clichés and not plot clichés? Isn't the chosen one also a trope? So what is the line between the tropes and the clichés when it comes to plots and characters? Like, I don't get if there's a difference. So that's my question to you. To you watching or listening to this, and also to Sean Glatch, because I'm confused. So that was all of them. That was the clichés, the examples of clichés. There's 3 types of clichés. There's figurative clichés, character clichés, and plot clichés. Okay. How to make clichés in writing original. Clichés might plague you, but they certainly shouldn't keep you from writing. It's important to remember that clichés became cliché for a reason. When first written, they describe something novel and beautiful to the audience. For the modern day, clichés simply need to be reconceptualized. Okay, so instead of avoiding them, we're making them new, right? Because we're not avoiding them, even though this article is about avoiding clichés. Most clichés can be made original. You just need to contextualize the cliché and give it new life. Here are some ideas for making clichés and writing original. Okay, good. We're getting into examples. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Okay, here we go. Avoiding clichés in writing. Turn vagueness into specificity. Many clichés have become trite and overwritten because they fail to say anything specific. Specificity is a writer's lifeblood. The more precise one's language, the clearer an image one paints with words. If a cliché can be rewritten for the context of your own writing, you can create something new and interesting together. For example, let's take the cliché at wit's end. These 3 words are rather nondescript. Where does a wit end? That's a good question, actually. And in any case, where does a wit begin? How does a wit tire out, and how does it replenish? It's a vague, empty phrase, and one that can be reinvigorated. I need a drink of water. Additionally, the emotion this cliché evokes is overdone. At wit's end feels rather weary and desperate, but what if it was humorous or lively or curious or confident? Here are some different ways to rewrite the cliché, each with a different tone or message. Instead of saying they were at wit's end, try humorous. A couple chimes short of being a cuckoo clock. Hopeful, turning failed ideas into new dreams. Adventurous. Mining for ideas where boulders had formed. Suspicious. Searching for ideas beneath old ideas, wondering where the solution disappeared. Annoyed. Ready to stick dynamite between their ears if it meant moving on. Okay. You could even try to reframe this cliche into an entire story. One story that feels at wit's end is the novel Hard-Boiled Wonderland at the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. Though not an explicit reimagining of the phrase at wit's end, Murakami writes his protagonist's brain as a dying town, and it turns out to be a metaphor for the protagonist's numbered days. Or just keep it simple and say your character was out of ideas. Does at wit's end actually mean out of ideas or just like overwhelmed? I thought at wit's end meant overwhelmed. So they're giving some suggestions on how to actually say at wit's end without saying at wit's end. A couple chimes short of being a cuckoo clock. Like, is that humorous? I don't know. I guess so. Maybe. I don't know. Not for me. Suspicious. Searching for ideas beneath old ideas. Wondering where the solutions be. I mean, it feels like you just made it long and kind of convoluted and just hard to understand. At wit's end, the reason people use it is because it's simple and easy to understand. Everybody knows this phrase. Why change it? Don't fix what isn't broken. Haha. Cliche. Don't fix what isn't broken. Or just keep it simple and say your character was out of ideas. I mean, why don't you just do that? Maybe I just not try so hard to be different kinds of things here, like humorous and adventurous and stuff like that, but I don't know. I mean, if you want to do that, you can do that. It's fine, but I mean, I would say just keep it simple, unless maybe if you're writing like literary fiction, maybe it's acceptable to do things like this, but I write fantasy, and sometimes it's just best to keep it simple. Especially if the world is complex. I like to just keep other things simple. Avoiding cliches in writing, giving an old phrase new context. Generally, it's hard to repurpose the meaning or impact of a cliche, but it is possible. If you put a cliche in a new or interesting context, one that changes or adds to the meaning of the cliche, you can get away with using it as long as the writing still feels fresh and engaging. Let's take the phrase rubbing salt in the wound. How can we make this trite phrase interesting? Here are a few ideas. Make a pun. Let's say you're writing a murder mystery in Salt Lake. You might get a laugh out of the reader if, after the body is dumped in the lake with a gash in its neck, the detective says they really rubbed salt in that wound. Change the meaning. We all know that rubbing salt in the wound means adding insult to injury, which is also a cliche. What if it meant something else? For example, salt actually helps a wound heal, as it prevents the wound from being infected. If you have a character who needs to learn hard lessons in order to heal from their wounds, perhaps you can repurpose salt in the cliche, or even use salt as a symbol for painful healing. Okay. Pull a pearls before swine. You know the comic. You don't have to be funny necessarily, but literal interpretations of cliches can make them surprising and new again. Take these strips which breathe new life into dead language. And they have a picture of this comic strip. I'm not gonna read this comic strip. You can go read it. What could we do with rubbing salt in the wound? The word wound has a lot of meanings, including a wound, wrapped around something, sensing something by scent, and sounding a horn. Find a way to put salt in any of these situations, and you'll certainly play with cliche. Okay, so instead of like avoiding it, you're just rephrasing it. Is that necessary to do? I don't know. Maybe it's necessary, but I don't know. I just like to keep it simple. It sounds best to just keep it simple and not go through all this trouble. Trouble, trouble, trouble. I knew you were trouble when you walked in. Trouble, trouble, trouble. Yeah, I just think it's just too much to bother with, but maybe you want to experiment with like new cliches, new phrasings and stuff like that. Avoiding character cliches. Build an archetype. Inside all the character cliches to avoid, there's an archetype waiting to develop. Archetypes are kind of like cliches, but with more substance. They're a set of traits that a character needs for a certain story, a platform from which a fully developed character springs. Let's take, for example, the cliche damsel in distress. What does she require? Most damsels are fair and lovely, caged and desperate to escape, waiting to be rescued by presumably true love, stereotypically feminine, in line for the throne. These simple descriptions give us the damsel's 1. Physical traits, 2. Personal motivations, and 3. Fatal flaws. These details are enough to start forming a character, though we'll need much more information than this. Moving towards a full archetype, our damsel in distress needs a plot. Yes, she's not just the victim. The goal is to make her a full-fledged protagonist. Hold on. I need to check my phone messages. Okay, nothing particularly important. Moving towards a full archetype, our damsel in distress needs a plot. Yes, she's not just a victim. The goal is to make her a full-fledged protagonist. Traditionally, the damsel's story begins and ends in the tower where she's imprisoned. Rapunzel, Snow White, and Fiona all wait for a man's heroism to rescue them. Fiona. Who is Fiona? Why can't I think of who Fiona is? Who's Fiona? I'm confused. Fiona. I know I recognize the name, but why? I don't remember. I can't. What? Who is Fiona? Let's imagine something different. What if the damsel was a heroine of her own story? In fact, what if she's seeking revenge, like the tough cop or her former captors? Or perhaps she grows up, leaves the crown, becomes a brilliant, airy professor. This is where cliches can actually improve your story. By mixing and matching different ideas and motives, the author is taking control of the story and its character, creating something original in the process. You mean unique, not original, because there are no original ideas. Now we can fully move away from the cliche damsel and construct a new, previously unwritten identity. This includes breaking down the original stereotypes with a new plot. Our damsel might benefit from being athletic, being skeptical of love, or having fraught relations with her father, the king. Finally, it involves giving her a name. What would you name her? It's safe to say that our character is no longer a damsel, and that's because we experiment with different plots and character traits to make her interesting and unique. By turning stereotypes into archetypes, writers can table their cliche characters for good. I see. So you're using cliches to make other cliches better. Basically, that's what it is. This is not about avoiding cliches in writing. This is about how to effectively use cliches in an interesting way. You're not avoiding them. You don't have to avoid them. And I think it's impossible, maybe to extend it, it's impossible to avoid cliches. So instead of avoiding the problem, you use it to your advantage. That's what you do. That's what you do. There's a Swan Princess song that I like. It goes, that's what you do for a friend. Oh, that's what you do for a friend. I like that song. It's fun. It's good if a song is fun because then it sticks in your head. Even though it's kind of a cringy song, it's fun. And that's what matters. So, yeah, I think it's a good I've seen this being recommended as how to deal with like archetypes, how to do archetypes, and how to deal with tropes and stereotypes. You mix and match everything. You mix them together and make something new. So you take the damsel in distress and you mix them with other cliches, and it becomes a whole entirely new and fresh character, perhaps, potentially. So that's good. It's good stuff. You're saying good stuff here. Can't remember who was Fiona. Oh, I kind of remember, but I don't really remember. Who was Fiona? What princess is that? That's a princess, right? We have Rapunzel. We have Snow White. Oh my gosh, why can I not remember who Fiona is? Who the heck is Fiona? Wait, Sleeping Beauty is Aurora, right? Yeah. Rose? No, Sleeping Beauty is Rose. Who's Aurora? Is that Sleeping Beauty? Wait. Cinderella is Cinderella. Yeah. Sleeping Beauty is Aurora or Rose. And who the heck is Fiona? Wait. Oh, wait. No, I remember. Isn't Fiona? Fiona is Shrek. Right? Fiona is Shrek. Isn't that? Are they talking about Shrek? Isn't that what her name was? Let me know. Avoiding plot cliches. Contextualize the story. Throughout this article, we've argued that cliches lack wisdom and originality, yet most cliches are wise and original were wise and original at one point, which is why many colloquialisms and adages in English are examples of cliche in writing. Now, the English language evolves a lot. The English language evolves a lot. This is especially true for the past couple of centuries, as advancements in technology and literacy have allowed us to share ideas at accelerating speeds. As a result, certain cliches represent certain eras, and writers of historical fiction can use those cliches to contextualize the story. Yes. Harper Lee does this. My voice came out funny. Harper Lee does this in To Kill a Mockingbird, while Scout reflects on the state of Macomb County during the Depression. She doesn't state that she grew up in the 1930s. Rather, Macomb was recently told they had nothing to fear but fear itself, referring to the quote from FDR. By Lee's time, that phrase had become heavily cliched, but by invoking the spirit of an America just 30 years prior to To Kill a Mockingbird's publication, Lee gives the cliche new life. For the reader, it's just as fresh as when America heard it during FDR's inauguration. Funnily enough, the Harry Potter series does something similar with FDR's famous saying. Dumbledore says, "Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself," to Harry, with strong historical weight. After all, FDR is that same president who guided the U.S. through most of World War II, whereas Voldemort represents the discriminatory death machine of terrible time of Germany. Although not a word-for-word use of the cliche, this moment brings fresh gravitas to FDR's sentiment. Interesting. I'm thinking of my own story. It's a historical fantasy fiction gothic, I don't know what. And I like to look up phrases from the time that I'm taking inspiration from, just because it's fun. But I didn't realize that maybe I could be actually making some of those cliches at that time new and fresh. Interesting to think. There is a lot here. It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to be doing this. Writers of historical fiction can use these cliches to contextualize the story. So cliches, phrases can be good and you can use it again after it hasn't been used in quite some time and it's suddenly new again, which is interesting, meaning that cliches can be recycled and made new and fresh and interesting and new and fresh and interesting. Okay. That's interesting. I mean, it really is interesting that cliches can actually be recycled. We don't have to fully avoid them and ignore them and put them into the trash and never see them again. We can see them again. Avoiding cliches in writing. Create a writing prompt. Cliches make for great writing prompts. Because cliches are vague and nondescript, there's ample creative space to write a story or poem in place of a trite idea. To turn a cliche into a writing prompt, all you need is a sense of curiosity. Asking questions and exploring the limits of a cliche will help turn it into something original. For example, let's turn the cliche beating a dead horse into some writing prompts. It's such an odd phrase, I can't help but ask questions like, is this just really heavy CPR? Can you make a dead horse speak? What would a dead horse say if it could? Do dead horses bruise? Do dead horses draw the carriage to hell or to heaven? Does beating a dead horse make it resurrect faster? That's funny. Hey, that's funny. These questions are prompts in their own way. Stories and poems often respond to abstract questions, so we're simply hijacking the cliche to create new question prompts. With this in mind, an old cliche can be given new blood simply by asking the right questions. So if you're stuck searching for writing ideas, try starting from cliche phrases. That's interesting. That's interesting action. That's an interesting... Why did I say action? I don't know why. That's an interesting thing to try, an interesting experiment to do, to just take one of your favorite cliche phrases and just ask a bunch of seemingly unrelated questions about it. And then take those questions and write a poem or story. That would be an interesting writing exercise to do when you feel like, oh, I got nothing to write, what am I going to do? Let's take, I don't know, time is money and ask how to make money into, how to make time, how to trade time. How would people trade time? How would people use time as money? Is money more important than time? Is time more important than money? Or I can't think of any fun and crazy things right now. Does beating a dead horse make it resurrect faster? You could make like a dark comedy out of this, I'm sure. So those are all the ways that you can make cliches in writing original. So you don't need to avoid them. There are ways to take the problem and to make something new out of them. And yet, or avoid cliches in writing altogether. Of course, the best advice we can give you is to avoid cliches altogether. Is that really the best advice? I feel like the above is the best advice. Even in your character's dialogue, use them very sparingly. They can also make your character seem less interesting or worth caring about. What should you use instead? In place of the cliche, try being direct. The reader will get annoyed if you say your character was beating a dead horse. Just say they were wasting their energy and they knew it. Better yet, show, don't tell. Why do you need to tell us that the character is beating a dead horse? Show us how they were wasting their energy in their words, thoughts, actions, etc. Employ metaphor or symbolism. When a cliche was interesting, it captured the reader because it used metaphor and symbolism in striking ways. Now, because the phrase is so overused, it has lost its freshness and originality. But the same mechanics that made one cliche interesting can make your writing interesting too. Employing metaphor, symbolism, imagery, and other literary devices can keep your writing interesting. Dun, 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 dun. So, they say the best advice we can give you is avoid cliches. I don't think that's the best advice, but anyway, they do give you options if you are somebody who really wants to avoid cliches. This is what you can do. but aren't metaphors and symbolisms, can't those also be cliches? What do you think? Because if they're saying that a cliche used a metaphor or symbolism in striking ways, but now it's overused, that means metaphors and symbolisms are cliches, right? Or you could make up a metaphor or symbolism. You could make a new one. You can make one that that fits into the world of your book. So that's the end of this article. There's nothing more. This is Sean Glatch. He is a poet, storyteller, writer, screenwriter based in New York City. Okay, so this article is not about how to avoid cliches in writing. That is a clickbait title. How to effectively use cliches in a unique and interesting way is what this article is about. Ending this with or avoid cliches in writing altogether when this wasn't what the article was about. This sounds like an added idea. I don't know why you put this in here. When you went into such detail about how to use cliches to your advantage, now you're saying, oh, but what if you just avoid it? Just best to avoid it. I don't see the point of this last section. I think just cut this out and retitle this article, because I think people are tired of hearing about avoiding cliches. Saying avoid cliches is a cliche, I say. I think some people might be tired of hearing avoid writing cliches. Don't write cliches. Like, how am I supposed to do that? I feel like my whole story is a cliche. All my characters are cliches now. Like, what am I supposed to do? A better article would be what you have been saying all up here. Just keep that. Just get rid of this useless section. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but I feel like they didn't need to get into this at the end. Anyway, that's the end of this article. That's the end of this video. I think this article was pretty good overall, except for that end bit. Maybe a 4 out of 5 in terms of good articles. It's not about how to avoid cliches in writing. It's about how to effectively use them to our advantage. But anyway. Overall, it was good and it was interesting. We found out that cliche is just click in French. That's interesting. Cliché is click in French. Cliché is an onomatopoeia. Did you know that cliché is an onomatopoeia? Did you know that? So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and what is your favorite phrase? Judging a book by its cover, time is money. What do you like to say? What are your favorite phrases? And if you don't know what to comment, the secret word, making it all the way to the end of this video, is mustache. And so, you will hear me in the next video. Keep hydrated. The fox is out.